when the world assumes you're guilty, only the truth can set you free. Marcus King had spent a decade as the epicenter of a relentless media storm, his life measured in stadium decibels and endorsement tiers. At 30, he was the NFL's ultimate archetype, a blend of elite athleticism and a charm that seemed surgically attached to his public persona. But that invincibility vanished in a New York minute. The night had begun at Aegis, an ultra-exclusive Manhattan lounge where the scent of expensive bourbon and arrogance hung heavy in the air. Marcus sat at a corner booth, the center of a celebratory circle after a career-defining win, unaware that the countdown to his downfall had already reached its final seconds. Friends joked around him, patting him on the shoulder, celebrating a game-winning touchdown, another endorsement deal, another magazine featured. He raised his glass, smiling broadly, grateful for the moment, thinking the night would pass like any other. But fate had different plans. The room suddenly shifted. Tension sparked over a trivial misunderstanding, an accidental bump. Words exchanged too harshly, too quickly. A young man, the son of a high-ranking official, approached him, voice raised, anger and entitlement clear in every syllable. Marcus tried to defuse it, smiling, holding up his hands, attempting charm, attempting reason, attempting to avoid the inevitable, knowing deep down that in this room, with adrenaline and alcohol, the situation was volatile. The confrontation escalated, words spilling into shouts, gestures turning into pushes, a chaotic blur of motion. Marcus reacted instinctively, a punch thrown in self-defense, then another strike, a flinch, a stumble, and suddenly the young man was on the ground, head striking the edge of a table, unconscious, blood seeping through his hair, panic erupting around them. The club became a storm of screaming, phones recording, flashbulbs capturing each movement, security trying and failing to control the chaos. Marcus froze, hand trembling, heart pounding, the reality of what had happened washing over him. He had never intended this, he had never wanted this, he had only wanted an evening to breathe, to escape, to forget the constant pressure of fame, of contracts, of expectations, of a life where every mistake, real or perceived, was amplified by millions watching. Police arrived in force, lights flashing red and blue, siren wailing through the crowded streets, drawing attention from pedestrians and onlookers eager to witness scandal in motion. Marcus was handcuffed, pulled into the back of a squad car, flashes of cameras following, phones recording, hashtags already trending on social media, the narrative forming instantly. Marcus King charged in fatal incident. NFL star embroiled in tragedy, reckless, dangerous, uncontrollable. The world had already judged, condemned, and crucified him in headlines before he had a chance to explain, defend, or breathe. Julia Sanders arrived in the middle of this storm of public scrutiny like a force of nature, sharp, precise, untouchable, an embodiment of discipline honed by years of legal battles won and reputations dismantled. She was 35, her presence commanding respect, her eyes cold and calculating, her mind a razor capable of dissecting the minutest detail. She did not admire fame. She did not fear power. She viewed the golden boy in handcuffs with detached analysis, evaluating risk, liability, and opportunity. She had been ordered to take the case by her firm, not because she chose it, but because she was the best at navigating impossible odds. She entered the detention center, heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floors, suit impeccable, hair pulled back to reveal a face that betrayed no weakness, eyes scanning, processing, anticipating. He noticed her immediately, leaning casually against the wall, smirk in place, playing at charm as though the handcuffs were accessories rather than symbols of a crumbling empire. "You must be Julia," he said, voice smooth, confident, grin effortless, as though he were negotiating a flirtation rather than facing legal scrutiny. "I've heard you're untouchable. Thought I'd see if the legend is real." She raised a single eyebrow, voice controlled, calm, utterly unshakable. "I'm here for your case, not your ego. You are not a legend. You are a problem I intend to close." The words hit him sharper than any blow. He froze, studying her, trying to discern any vulnerability, any softness behind the mask. Nothing. She radiated control, discipline, precision. That attention filled the room, dense and suffocating. A vast expanse of unspoken challenges stretched between them, an invisible battlefield where each evaluated the other's strengths and weaknesses. That Marcus's grin wavered, then returned, less confident, more calculating. He was used to attention, praise, fear, and this woman offered none of it. "You don't like me," he said, half challenge, half amusement, testing her reaction, searching for a crack in the icy exterior. "I don't care whether you like me or not," she replied, cold, measured. "I care whether I win. And right now, you are just evidence and liability rolled into one." He scrutinized her, reading every microexpression, every subtle movement. Searching for humanity in the steel of her composure, he felt an unfamiliar stir of respect, frustration, and intrigue. She opened her briefcase, documents stacked with meticulous precision, files labeled, organized for every possible scenario. Anticipating every contingency, that he glanced at the folders, then back at her eyes. Noticing the way she did not flinch, she did not hesitate, her body language rigid with readiness. Marcus felt a tug of admiration and irritation intertwined, an unease that he did not understand, that he hated needing anyone, especially someone who refused to yield. "You'll regret this," he muttered, half joke, half threat, voice low, controlled. "We'll see," she said, standing tall, closing the folder. "I don't lose." Outside, the small, sterile room, the world continued its judgment, cameras flashing, headlines screaming, opinions forming and condemning, while inside, the first battle lines were drawn. Marcus's impulsive charm versus Julia's icy discipline, ego versus precision, chaos versus strategy, emotions versus calculation. They were poised on a collision course neither fully understood, an intricate, explosive dance of power, temptation, and survival. The fall of a king had begun, and nothing would remain the same. Each heartbeat, each glance, each word marking the beginning of a war of wills, public perception, private vulnerability, and the first sparks of a connection that would terrify them both. The days following their initial encounter shifted from shock to a grueling strategic grind. Marcus remained confined, the hum of the holding cell's fluorescent lights becoming the metronome of his new, diminished reality. Each time the heavy door groaned open, he expected the media's vitriol to follow, but instead, it was always Julia, a constant, rhythmic presence of clicking heels and rustling case files. She didn't offer comfort. She offered a cold, analytical lifeline that he found himself grasping with increasing desperation. Between the lines of legal jargon and witness statements, Marcus began to see the immense weight she carried on his behalf, a realization that slowly eroded his defensive arrogance. He clenched his fists in the cuffs, breathing deeply, aware that the clash of their personalities, their wills, was only beginning, and that the journey ahead would test him far beyond anything football, media, or fame had ever demanded. The courtroom was a cavern of cold authority, its walls echoing with whispers and the occasional shuffle of papers, its air thick with anticipation and unspoken judgment. Marcus sat at the defense table, his posture rigid, eyes flicking between the door. Julia, his own hands encased in cuffs that had long been removed but still felt heavy in memory. His mind churned, anticipating every possible outcome. But nothing had prepared him for the presence that would shift the entire battlefield into a new dimension. If in vain, entered the room with the precision and confidence of a predator accustomed to victory. He was 38, lean, calculated, exuding authority that demanded attention without needing to raise his voice. He had been Julia's husband once, married for years before ambition and circumstance drove them apart, leaving scars that neither had fully acknowledged. He knew her patterns, her methods, her vulnerabilities, and he wielded that knowledge like a weapon, each step deliberate, each glance a subtle assertion of power over her. He approached the prosecutor's podium, briefcase in hand, documents meticulously arranged, ready to manipulate perception, twist narratives, and exploit every weakness. He glanced at Marcus briefly, recognition sparking a flicker of calculation in his sharp eyes. He understood Marcus's charm, his impulsivity, his pride, and he had already begun plotting how to bend those traits to serve his strategic advantage. Julia noticed him immediately, a flicker of tension passing through her chest, though her face betrayed nothing. She had anticipated the procedural challenges, media scrutiny, public opinion, but she had not anticipated the precise, personal attack that was about to unfold in the form of a man who knew her intimately, who had once shared her life and understood her instincts. She straightened, breathing controlled, every muscle prepared to respond to the onslaught of intellect and psychological maneuvering she knew was coming. Ethan's eyes met hers briefly, a spark of past intimacy mixed with rivalry, then returned to the proceedings, acknowledging the jury with practiced poise, smiling faintly, calm but predatory. He had come not merely to prosecute a case, but to settle an old score, to assert dominance over a woman who had once been his partner and now stood as his adversary in the crucible of public judgment. He began to speak, voice measured, articulate, each word chosen to provoke subtle doubt, each sentence calibrated to manipulate perception without overt aggression. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, voice smooth, commanding attention, his gaze sweeping the room with the precision of a surgeon examining a patient. "We are here to examine a tragic event, a life lost, a choice that cannot be undone." Marcus King, while celebrated as an athlete, was present that night in circumstances that demand scrutiny, that require accountability. He paused, allowing the weight of implication to hang in the air, watching the reactions of each juror, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the faint tension in their expressions. That Marcus's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing, feeling the precision of the attack, aware that this was not merely a legal maneuver but a psychological siege. Ethan turned briefly to Julia, smile thin, knowing, provocative, and of course, "We rely on counsel to guide us through the complexities of law," he said, voice smooth, with an edge of familiarity that cut deeper than any legal argument. "Miss Sanders, having once shared a life with me, will no doubt bring her unique perspective to the defense. That I trust the jury will see the distinction between objective advocacy and personal bias." Julia's eyes remained steady, her mind racing through counter-strategies, anticipating the subtle manipulations, the psychological traps hidden between his words. He had the advantage of history, of understanding her impulses, her fears, and he intended to exploit every one. Marcus shifted slightly, awareness sharpening, recognizing that this man's mastery extended beyond the courtroom, into the very fabric of human interaction, understanding motives, anticipating reactions. That he felt a surge of anxiety, tempered by resolve, aware that survival in this battle would demand trust in Julia, in strategy, not in instinct alone. She met his gaze, unflinching, acknowledging the silent war being waged not just in legal argument, but in the psychological currents swirling through the room. She would need to anticipate every move, Ethan's every word, a chessboard in real time, while protecting Marcus from a relentless assault on character, reputation, and credibility. Every fiber of her being focused, each thought calibrated, calculating defenses, anticipating attacks, preparing counters. The room, the jury, Marcus, even the air seemed to bend under the pressure of the duel that had begun before a single objection was made. The presence of Ethan Vane transformed the proceedings from a simple criminal trial into a battlefield of intellect, ego, history, and unspoken emotion, where one misstep could cost lives, careers, freedom, and trust. The tension was palpable, thick, pressing against each occupant of the courtroom. Every breath measured, every glance laden with weight. Marcus felt it as a pulse of danger, Julia as a familiar challenge, Ethan as a predator savoring the hunt, and the jury as unwitting witnesses to a collision of past and present, personal and professional, truth and manipulation. The stage had been set, the players positioned, the stakes monumental, far beyond what any headline could capture, far beyond what any observer could comprehend, far beyond what Marcus King or Julia Sanders could have imagined before stepping into this crucible together. Days bled into nights as Marcus King and Julia Sanders immersed themselves in the preparation for trial, forced into proximity by circumstance, legally bound and professionally obligated, each moment revealing new fractures and unexpected alignments. The investigative phase forced a grueling intimacy that neither was prepared for. As they dissected thousands of pages of discovery, Marcus began to realize that Julia's Ice Queen persona was a structural necessity, not a personality trait. He watched her skip meals to cross-reference cell tower pings, her eyes bloodshot, but her focus unwavering. For the first time, he saw her not as a cold adversary or a hired gun, but as a person who had sacrificed everything: hobbies, relationships, sleep, to be the best in a field that looked for any excuse to dismiss her. This glimpse into her isolation didn't just earn his respect. It mirrored his own lonely existence at the top of the NFL. The barrier between them didn't just crack, it dissolved, replaced by a shared, quiet understanding of the cost of excellence. The time together fostered a tense intimacy, built not on trust but on necessity, proximity, and shared purpose. They were forced to rely on each other, Marcus for access to truth and context about the incident, Julia for guidance and protection from legal and public ruin. Their dialogues were sharp, often combative, verging on contempt, then softening when strategy required. Candidness that he challenged her conclusions, she countered with logic and facts. He responded with insight from experience. She adapted strategies based on his input. They were intertwined in a delicate dance of professional necessity, each aware that misstep could compromise the case, each also aware of the subtle shift in tension when glances lingered, when touches occurred accidentally, when shared frustration at the injustice or media frenzy created fleeting alignment. Marcus's past came under scrutiny: aggression, pressure from the NFL, trauma from repeated injuries, public expectations, private doubts. They dissected incidents, quotes, press coverage, video footage, highlight reels juxtaposed with Fight Club evidence, anything that could provide leverage or risk. Through this, Julia saw Marcus not as the reckless, entitled athlete portrayed in headlines, but as a human shaped by pressure, expectation, loss, injury, and circumstance. Aggression and bravado were shields, not character flaws alone. He saw Julia's unyielding control and precision, her refusal to bend to charm or threat, her intellectual dominance tempered by glimpses of personal struggle and perhaps loneliness. That he recognized a fierce dedication that mirrored, if in a different domain, his own commitment to excellence. Nights blurred into early mornings, fluorescent lamps casting harsh light over open folders, coffee cups accumulating, scribbled notes everywhere, hearts and minds straining against the enormity of the task. Marcus and Julia discovered mutual frustration at a system that punished mistakes without context, at media narratives that reduced humans to caricatures, at legal opponents like Ethan Vane, who used history and intimacy as weapons. They began to respect each other's methods and intelligence, though neither admitted it aloud. Tension between them escalated, emotions simmering beneath the surface, sometimes spilling into brief flashes of irritation, anger, or unexpected camaraderie. They were two powerful forces, opposite in personality, compelled into alignment by circumstance, each learning, adapting, and subtly challenging the other's perceptions of morality, loyalty, and humanity. Through this process, their relationship became a crucible, testing patience, ego, trust, frustration, and attraction. That Marcus's charm and impulsivity clashed with Julia's precision and discipline. Yet moments emerged when proximity and shared struggle blurred lines, accidental touches, exchanged glances, unspoken acknowledgement of mutual endurance. The case demanded collaboration, emotion intertwined with strategy, creating tension, frustration, and a burgeoning, complicated bond. This crucible forged understanding, though fragile, precarious, and entirely unspoken. They uncovered the dirty laundry of past incidents, media narratives, league pressures, injuries, public perception, each revealing not only leverage for the case, but profound human truths, shaping their perceptions of each other, preparing the ground for conflicts, alliances, desires, and betrayals yet to come. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant city noise filtering through partially closed blinds. Marcus and Julia sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, papers, documents, and laptop screens spread between them, coffee cups cold, scribbled notes scattered in chaotic precision. The case had consumed them, days and nights blending into one relentless cycle of preparation, analysis, and confrontation of uncomfortable truths that Marcus's hands twitched as he flipped through documents, her eyes sharp on every movement, observing not just content but hesitation, body language, subtle cues that betrayed thought processes that he tried to tease, half laughing, half defiant. "You really don't miss a thing, do you?" She looked up briefly, ice in her gaze, then returned to the files, voice controlled. "Distractions cost lives, Mr. King. Distractions cost cases. Distractions cost truth." The tension was electric, not the casual flirtation of the past, but something denser, charged, impossible to ignore. They were inches apart, forced by circumstance into proximity, shared stress creating intimacy neither had allowed themselves to acknowledge before. The room was small, the world outside irrelevant, judgment suspended. Leaving only two people and the magnitude of their shared struggle, Marcus's gaze lingered on her hands, her posture, her focused expression, his pulse quickening, awareness sharpening with a mixture of admiration, frustration, and forbidden desire. He tried to maintain composure, but proximity, stress, and unspoken energy collided into a spark he could neither hide nor control. She noticed it in a fleeting glance, the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes followed her movements, tracking without permission, aware of boundaries he should not cross. She shifted slightly, paper rustling, trying to regain professional detachment, but the air had changed, charged with unacknowledged attraction, mutual tension, conflict between control and impulse. Hours passed, documents rearranged, references cross-checked, legal strategies debated, brainstorms exploding with intensity. And as the night deepened, the exhaustion and pressure became palpable. Marcus reached across to point at a line of text, his fingers brushing hers, lightly, accidentally, though neither withdrew immediately. The brief contact lingered, sparking a jolt of awareness, both startled and electrified. She looked up, eyes meeting his, recognition of the spark passing silently between them. The professional barrier, carefully maintained for weeks, was cracking. The tension was no longer purely intellectual or strategic, but physical, emotional, uncontrollable. Their breaths quickened, hearts beating faster, adrenaline from the case intertwining with something far more primal. They leaned slightly closer, as if drawn by force neither fully understood, attention divided between documents and each other. Words became unnecessary, movements heavier, more deliberate. Marcus's hand hovered near hers, then brushed, then lingered. The moment stretched, dense with possibility, an unspoken agreement that this proximity had crossed boundaries meant for safety, control, professionalism. She met his gaze, cold mask slipping just enough to betray awareness of desire, conflict between reason and impulse, between duty and human instinct. Her lips pressed together, eyes sharp, breath catching subtly, not admitting the impact, yet unable to ignore it. The air around them throbbed with the tension of suppressed need and undeniable attraction, each aware that discovery would be catastrophic, each aware that desire could destroy not only the case but their reputations, careers, public perception. Then it happened, slow, inevitable. Marcus leaned slightly closer, hand finding hers more deliberately, thumb brushing the back of her fingers, a touch laden with intent, sparked by stress, pressure, and long-suppressed longing. She did not pull away, nor did she retreat. Instead, she met the touch, acknowledging it with a tension that tightened in her chest and stomach. They were on the precipice, a point of no return. Their professional facade slipping as raw emotion, stress, desire, and human need collided. The touch deepened, hesitation mingled with impulsivity, breath quickened, fingers intertwined momentarily, then lingered, foreheads nearly touching, eyes locked in unspoken understanding of risk, danger, and inevitability. They leaned in closer, as if the world had dissolved into the room around them, into the heat, into the tension, into the undeniable spark that had been building beneath layers of professionalism, control, mutual scrutiny, frustration, and admiration. For Marcus, the moment was a release of all. The pressure, stress, anger, pride, and fear he had carried, channeling it into one act of reckless vulnerability. For Julia, it was the collision of reason and instinct, the surrender of perfect control acknowledgement of desire, acknowledgement of the complexity of human connection beyond intellect, ethics, or career strategy. They kissed briefly, urgently, an explosion of restrained emotion, release, temptation, passion, each aware that the consequences could be ruinous but unable to stop, unable to retreat, unable to deny the spark that had ignited in the crucible of stress, proximity, and unspoken longing. The documents remained spread, coffee gone cold, but the world outside had no relevance now. Their universe reduced to each other, their tension, a shared secret, point of no return reached, professional and personal boundaries shattered, trust and temptation intertwined, preparing the stage for battles, alliances, and betrayals yet to come. Ethan Vane's presence loomed like a shadow over every aspect of Marcus and Julia's preparation, the courtroom, even their private interactions. He had sensed, almost immediately, the tension that had developed between them, reading subtle cues of proximity, body language, lingering glances, and moments of vulnerability he had not anticipated. He understood that Marcus's impulsive tendencies, his charm, his pride, and Julia's disciplined control, cold precision, and rare glimpses of vulnerability created a landscape ripe for exploitation that he did not need concrete evidence to strike. Psychological warfare, media manipulation, and strategic insinuation would suffice. Emails began to appear, carefully worded, leaks to reporters that hinted at impropriety, without making outright accusations, each designed to sow doubt in public perception and in the minds of those connected to the case. Confidential witnesses were subtly pressured, phone calls hinting that their cooperation might be scrutinized unless they aligned with the prosecution narrative. That a subtle but constant pressure built, like water slowly seeping into cracks in stone, persistent, insidious, undetectable to anyone except the most vigilant Marcus and Julia. Ethan called Marcus privately under the guise of procedural discussion, voice smooth, controlled, friendlier than necessary, masking menace beneath the calm exterior. "Marcus," he said, measured, eyes sharp, body language relaxed but controlled. "You and Ms. Sanders seem quite close. One might wonder about boundaries, personal motivations, conflicts of interest." Marcus's jaw tightened, sensing the edge hidden beneath civility. "I'm focused on the case," he replied, trying to mask both irritation and unease, aware that every word, gesture, and inflection could be weaponized. Ethan leaned slightly forward, smile thin, calculating. Of course, that I merely suggest caution. Perception matters as much as truth. Your cooperation, her impartiality, both are under scrutiny, and the wrong move could be unfortunate." Each word was layered, threat veiled in civility, implication entwined with suggestion, seed planted in Marcus's mind. He left Marcus unsettled, aware of the thin line he now walked between loyalty, professionalism, desire, and vulnerability. Julia received subtle messages too, anonymous tips, carefully placed leaks in social media and press coverage that implied favoritism, ethics violations, or inappropriate involvement with her client. Moments of professional scrutiny were amplified, her reputation questioned in whispers and public commentary. Ethan's orchestration was methodical, unrelenting, psychological assault designed to destabilize both defense and client, forcing decisions under pressure, creating doubt, and isolating her from allies. That he leveraged the past, their intimate history, without crossing legal boundaries, turning knowledge of personal weakness into a strategic weapon. The result was a mounting tension between Marcus and Julia, not from distrust of each other, but from external pressures, public perception, media narratives, and the subtle insinuations planted by Ethan. That a mutual unease settled in, spurring conflict, misunderstanding, and hesitation. Marcus questioned her loyalty, haunted by the media's spin, subtle innuendo, and the knowledge that one misstep could destroy his defense and reputation. She felt the weight of professional and ethical standards colliding with personal involvement, aware that the moment in the apartment, the kiss, the spark of attraction, had become a vulnerability that Ethan was exploiting. Late nights in the office, preparing counter-arguments, reviewing evidence, coordinating witness statements, were now layered with this new pressure. He would approach her with tense, unspoken questions about the insinuations in the press, about her impartiality, about her intentions. She responded with controlled reassurance, strategic focus, and occasional terse irritation, aware that yielding to emotion would be catastrophic. Yet the moments of unintentional intimacy, fleeting touches and shared frustration and subtle eye contact continued, their connection growing more complex under the weight of Ethan's manipulation. Marcus became hyper-aware of every interaction between them, interpreting signals, hesitating at casual proximity, fearful of public misinterpretation or professional compromise. He wrestled internally with desire, trust, anger, and the suffocating pressure of potential ruin. Julia balanced professionalism with emotional restraint, calculating every move, anticipating the psychological chessboard Ethan had orchestrated, sustaining composure while internally managing rising tension, exhaustion, frustration, and the challenge of navigating personal involvement without compromising duty. The psychological siege extended beyond them, infecting strategy, interrogation, media narrative, public perception, and potential jury bias. Each decision carried the weight of consequence. How they sat, spoke, responded to reporters, interacted in public or private, was monitored, analyzed, and could be used against them. Ethan's manipulation was pervasive, insidious, transforming every action, gesture, or comment into potential leverage, pressure, or weapon. That he created an environment where trust was fragile, where scrutiny was constant, where professional and personal boundaries blurred, where the pressure cooker of trial preparation intensified the emotional, mental, and physical strain on Marcus and Julia. By the end of long nights, they were exhausted, tense, aware that every interaction, every glance, was layered with risk. Yet despite the siege, despite manipulation, despite stress, they relied on each other, protecting, collaborating, combating the external assault together. Their bond, complex, charged, emotional, and professional, continued to deepen, fractured by pressure yet strengthened by necessity, preparing both for the looming courtroom battles and the personal challenges, desires, conflicts, alliances, temptations, trust, loyalties, ethics, and emotional vulnerabilities that would define the next stage of their journey. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, old leather, and tension, each breath heavy with anticipation, each step of the bailiff echoing like a drumbeat marking the onset of conflict. Marcus sat rigidly at the defense table, suit perfectly pressed, hair slightly tousled from sleepless nights of preparation, mind racing with every potential argument, defense strategy, and subtle manipulation Ethan Vane might deploy. Julia sat beside him, eyes scanning documents, notes meticulously organized, calculations running silently through her mind like a high-speed algorithm, anticipating objections, witness responses, and tactical diversions. She was calm outwardly, but inside, adrenaline surged, heartbeat synchronized with the pulse of pressure, cognition stretched to maximum capacity, awareness of every juror's expression, every subtle gesture, every nuance of tone as critical as the evidence in hand. Ethan rose smoothly, voice measured, each word precise, designed to provoke doubt and elicit a reaction that could be spun against the defense. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, face calm, body controlled, voice even, eyes scanning strategically. We gather to examine the tragic consequences of reckless action. The defendant, Marcus King, celebrated athlete, icon, found himself in circumstances that led to irreversible loss. His history, his aggression, his behavior patterns, all relevant in evaluating responsibility, intent, and accountability. Every phrase carried double weight, implication veiled in civility, history weaponized subtly against both Marcus and Julia. Marcus felt each word like a blade against his psyche, perception, ego, while Julia's mind raced through counter-strategies, calculating how to shield him from psychological assault, media interpretation, and jury bias simultaneously. Julia rose to respond, voice controlled, poised, projecting authority while masking the tempest of emotion within. She revealed evidence meticulously, highlighting misinterpretations and procedural errors, carefully framing Marcus's actions in context of trauma, league pressures, provocation, and unintended consequences. Each point was precise, calculated, designed to counter Ethan's insinuations and maintain juror confidence without revealing vulnerability. But then, buried deep in her strategic arsenal, was Marcus's secret, the chronic neurological condition caused by repeated concussions, a fact that could explain impulsivity but also devastate public perception, career prospects, and personal reputation. She wrestled with moral calculus. Revealing this truth could save him legally, but ruin him socially, financially, professionally. Every second of hesitation was observed by Ethan, who subtly adjusted tone, gestures, body language, probing, testing reactions, planting doubt. Witness after witness was called, each scrutinized, each cross-examined with precision, psychological tension escalating steadily like a storm approaching critical mass. Marcus's pulse pounded with each challenge, each insinuation, each subtle suggestion of moral failing. His eyes flicking to Julia for reassurance and guidance. She remained poised, calculating, steering testimony, interjecting with interventions, clarifying evidence, all while internally debating the moral weight of revealing the secret. Aware that her decision would redefine their relationship, his fate, public perception, and possibly the outcome of the trial itself. The jury's expressions shifted subtly, nuanced reactions to tone, body language, emphasis, and timing of revelation. Marcus felt the pressure as an almost physical weight, anxiety coiling tight in chest, muscles tense, mind calculating and second-guessing. He trusted Julia completely, yet feared the consequences of absolute honesty. Understanding that exposure could destroy him beyond legal parameters, he glanced at her, searching for guidance, hesitation, admission of uncertainty. But her gaze was steady, calculated, ironclad, masking every emotion to control the courtroom, protect him legally while preserving integrity. Then Ethan introduced new evidence, footage of the incident subtly framed to suggest provocation, aggression, recklessness. That he used pauses, intonation, questions to the jury, his presence dominating the room without raising voice. Each gesture a calculated assault on perception. Each move forced Julia into rapid recalibration, anticipating juror reactions, countering manipulations, deploying logic and strategy to neutralize insinuation and maintain control. She caught subtle lies, exaggerations, misdirections, redirected testimony, interrupted subtly to preserve credibility, always balancing truth, ethics, advocacy, while internally bracing for moral consequences. Marcus struggled with moral breakdown internally, the weight of secrecy, pressure, public scrutiny, media narrative, career destruction, personal trust, and the growing, complicated bond with Julia. Colliding forces of fear, desire, loyalty, and trust churned within him, each observation of Ethan's manipulation amplifying stress, adrenaline, and conflicted emotion. His public persona, private truth, and personal vulnerabilities converged, threatening psychological unraveling if he did not anchor to the strategic guidance of Julia. By the end of the first day, both were drained, sweat and exhaustion coating tense muscles, mental acuity stretched to limits. Marcus respected Julia beyond measure, awareness of her brilliance and unyielding resolve intertwining with personal attraction, emotional dependency, and trust forged under duress. She recognized his resilience, adaptability, loyalty, humanity hidden beneath charm and bravado, balancing professional duty with moral and emotional complexity. The trial had become more than a legal contest. It was a psychological crucible, testing morality, ethics, emotional resilience, trust, desire, and strategic acumen on every front, each second a battle of intellect, emotion, and survival where any misstep could be catastrophic. The morning light spilled unevenly through the courtroom blinds, casting fragmented patterns across polished wood and cold tile, as if the universe itself acknowledged the fracture looming over Marcus and Julia. The tension had reached a threshold where every heartbeat, whispered word, glance, courtroom gesture carried the weight of impending catastrophe. Ethan Vane's strategy had evolved from subtle manipulation to overt psychological assault, deploying both public insinuation and private pressure. With surgical precision that he released into the press selective images and narratives, implying inappropriate closeness between Marcus and Julia, hinting at conflicts of interest, suggesting professional bias, all while never stating outright claims enough to be legally actionable. The courtroom was now a stage for controlled chaos, public opinion manipulated outside and inside simultaneously. The psychological siege reached its zenith when Ethan leaked a series of grainy photos to a national tabloid. Marcus and Julia leaned close over a table, their hands nearly touching, framed to look like a clandestine tryst rather than a late-night strategy session. The headline, "Defense or Desire," went viral within minutes. When Marcus saw the notification, the betrayal felt visceral. He confronted Julia in the courthouse stairwell, his voice a jagged whisper of accusation. Was this the plan? To make me a pawn in some twisted game with your ex? Julia didn't flinch, though the pulse in her neck was visible. It's a distraction, Marcus. Ethan is losing the legal argument, so he's attacking the only thing left, our credibility. If you break now, he wins. The air between them was thick with a volatile mix of fury and the very attraction the photos had exploited, a tension so sharp it threatened to shatter the defense before they could reach the courtroom floor. Yet in that chaos, he glimpsed clarity. She was still allied with him, still protecting him, still focused on the ultimate objective, even as their personal bond was tested, strained, and nearly shattered. By the day's end, Marcus and Julia returned to preparation rooms, isolated, exhausted, emotionally raw, bond frayed by manipulation, yet strengthened by confrontation and recognition of mutual necessity. They understood now the stakes were higher than professional victory. Trust had been tested, loyalty strained, desire and morality intertwined, emotional resilience challenged. The battlefield had shifted from courtroom to psyche, from external strategy to internal crucible, from professional to personal, from perception to reality, forcing decisions, actions, and alliances that would define the trial, public perception, careers, personal trust, and the very core of Marcus and Julia's complex, volatile, impossibly intertwined relationship. The courtroom was suffused with tension, heavy as fog, every eye fixed, every ear attuned, every heartbeat synchronized with the pendulum swing of justice. Julia Sanders rose, documents in hand, voice steady but resonant, each syllable deliberate, careful, strategic. Her gaze swept the jury, then locked on Ethan Vane, unflinching, measured, calculated, the culmination of weeks of preparation, psychological warfare, and personal restraint manifesting in every gesture. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice controlled yet carrying the weight of moral authority, emotional intensity layered beneath professional detachment. "We have been presented with narratives, impressions, and selective evidence designed to mislead, to suggest culpability based on perception rather than fact. But today, we confront truth, justice, accountability, not rumor or manipulation." Each word struck like precision-engineered logic tempered by human clarity, piercing the veil of insinuation. Ethan's face remained impassive, masking calculation, eyes flickering briefly as he realized the counteroffensive was now public, strategic, unassailable. Julia's counteroffensive hinged on a single, overlooked piece of metadata from a bystander's deleted cloud storage. She systematically dismantled Ethan's narrative by producing a high-resolution angle of the club's exit, showing the victim's associate, a man Ethan had intentionally excluded from the witness list, delivering the fatal shove that sent the young man toward the table's edge. The prosecution didn't just overlook this individual, Julia stated, her voice echoing with surgical precision. They buried him to ensure a high-profile conviction. She then presented a log of Ethan's private communications with the lead investigator, exposing the deliberate suppression of this footage. The courtroom fell into a deafening silence as the jury watched the evidence of Ethan's ethical malpractice unfold in real time, effectively ending his career while clearing Marcus's path to exoneration. Marcus sat tense, watching her navigate the apex of intellectual, emotional, and ethical challenge, trusting her completely, aware that every action carried risk for him, career, public perception, and personal trust. Yet her mastery of narrative, legal precision, and ethical clarity reassured him, anchored him, demonstrated the depth of competence and integrity beneath her icy exterior. The emotional bond, strained and tested through crisis, was affirmed silently. Mutual understanding of survival, loyalty, desire, trust, and professional respect crystallizing in shared acknowledgement. By the conclusion, Julia's final statements synthesized moral, legal, ethical, personal, public dimensions. Justice is not a tool for manipulation, perception, or personal vendetta. Today, we affirm that truth, morality, and accountability prevail over artifice, deception, and coercion. Mr. King's actions, motivation, context, all have been examined. Culpability lies with the true instigator. The court must recognize fact over narrative crafted for advantage. The jury, meticulously guided through chronology, contradictions, context, and manipulation, absorbed the entirety, emotional and rational faculties engaged, decisions now informed by clarity and authority rather than perception. If slumped imperceptibly, public exposure of ethical missteps, misdirection, manipulation, personal vendetta laid bare, professional reputation crumbling under scrutiny, he realized the trial, once a stage for dominance, had become a crucible for accountability and exposure. His strategy overturned, his position diminished, public perception shifted, media coverage reframed. His influence neutralized. Julia had executed the ultimate counter, preserving client integrity, ethical responsibility, personal trust, legal precision, and public accountability simultaneously. Marcus was exonerated. The true instigator held accountable, public perception recalibrated, careers, personal trust, professional respect, and morality balanced through meticulous, strategic, ethical execution. Julia and Marcus, though battered, exhausted, emotionally raw, and stripped of external pretense, shared a profound acknowledgement of survival, loyalty, and resilience forged through crisis. Manipulation, trust, desire, and unflinching commitment to truth. The trial concluded, not with spectacle, media frenzy, or personal triumph alone, but with clarity, justice, accountability, and the affirmation of human complexity navigated under duress, preparing the final chapter of consequence, freedom, reflection, and nascent personal connection. Months had passed since the courtroom battles, months in which the glare of cameras, the weight of public scrutiny, and the pressure of reputation had finally eased into absence. Marcus no longer carried the mantle of celebrity, NFL fame replaced by anonymity, his schedule freed from interviews, endorsements, and relentless public expectation that he walked through streets unrecognized. Each step a reclamation of personal space, autonomy, freedom from the constructed narratives that had dominated his life. The sense of relief was tangible, subtle at first, then swelling with recognition that survival, truth, justice, and personal integrity had been preserved, even if career and glory were lost. Julia had likewise stepped away from the pinnacle of legal prestige, the title of top attorney exchanged for quieter practice, ethical clarity, peace from the relentless political, professional, media-driven battles. She lived in smaller spaces, focused on work that mattered without spectacle, without manipulation, without personal vendettas eclipsing truth and integrity. Her mornings were quiet, uninterrupted by deadlines that demanded emotional compromise. Her evenings spent in reflection, routine, and careful cultivation of boundaries she had sacrificed during months of crisis. They met by chance in a small, nondescript bar on the far side of the city, far from cameras, press, or any vestige of public expectation. Marcus entered first, recognizing the space as neutral, shared neither claims to status nor pretense of celebrity. Julia arrived moments later, casual, unassuming, presence composed yet subtly radiant. Emotional and psychological armor relaxed but aware of human interaction, connection, and trust rebuilt over months of separation. They approached one another, measured. Mutual recognition in eyes, awareness of past turbulence tempered by shared survival, trust, loyalty, and human complexity. The air between them was charged, not with spectacle or fame, but with quiet understanding, acknowledgement of resilience, acknowledgement of lessons learned, acknowledgement of shared experience and desire tempered by circumstance and personal evolution. They spoke first of trivialities, small observations, muted humor, shared memories without reliving pain, acknowledging history without dwelling in it. The conversation flowed naturally, unscripted, yet each word carried subtext. trust reaffirmed, desire unthreatened by obligation, connection unmediated by expectation or external pressure. Marcus observed Julia's posture, her gestures, her calm energy, and recognized in her presence not a professional facade, but an authentic human being, complex, capable, resilient. The spark they had once hidden, tested, strained, now flickered freely, tempered by wisdom, experience, reflection, and mutual respect. They ordered drinks, sat at a corner table, light low, ambient noise providing privacy. Conversation moving from mundane to reflective, acknowledging growth, loss, freedom, and the possibility of something new. The bar, humble, quiet, unnoticed, served as a sanctuary, neutral ground where fame, no manipulation, no expectation could intrude. They shared smiles, glances, subtle gestures of warmth, comfort, mutual recognition of survival together and independently. Both carried scars, emotional, psychological, professional, but neither burdened by necessity to impress, perform, or conform. The moment was theirs, uncontested, unpressured, free from the spectacle that had dominated months of struggle. Marcus spoke finally, voice low, steady, resonant. "It's strange, being here, without cameras, without pressure, just us." Julia nodded, eyes meeting his, unflinching, calm, reflective. "It is we survived, not as icons, not as professionals defined by others, but as people, wiser, perhaps, connected, without pretense, whole, despite loss." They laughed softly, not at humor alone but at relief, recognition, shared understanding of everything endured, and yet everything preserved. The past, with all its intensity, trauma, passion, manipulation, and revelation, remained present as memory, but no longer dictated behavior, emotion, or trust. Evening deepened, lights dimmed, floor quiet except for murmurs of other patrons. They lingered, aware that the freedom they now shared was rare, earned, fragile yet resilient, born of struggle, truth, trust, and endurance. Marcus reached for her hand. Julia allowed it, both recognizing human connection without expectation, without agenda, without obligation, only presence, choice, mutual acknowledgement. Their fingers intertwined, subtle, deliberate, anchored in reality, grounded in survival, possibility, hope. They spoke little, words unnecessary, communication layered in gestures, glances, shared breathing, mutual grounding, quiet affirmation of what had been endured, what had been learned, and what could now begin anew. Outside, the city continued unaware, streets alive, lights flickering, life moving on. Their universe, small, contained, authentic, remained intact, independent of public scrutiny, professional triumph, or antagonist interference. They were free, not in fame, fortune, or position, not in titles, career, or accolades, but free in truth, choice, connection, and possibility, ready to navigate life together, unchained from spectacle, pressure, or past manipulation, embracing the human reality of imperfection, trust, desire, and authentic companionship.